Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to concurrent session 2C, Pollution and Climate Politics in the Gulf Coast. Apologies, Pollution and Climate Politics, Environmental Justice, Hurricanes, and Extreme Heat. My name is Ariel Wharton, and I'm a climate change specialist for the Center for Community Engagement, Environmental Justice, and Health at the University of Maryland. And I am blessed to have some great speakers, panelists right here on this session. The first will be Adriana Gonzalez. She is an environmental justice organizer from Sierra Club, Puerto Rico. I have Miss Catherine Egeland. She is the chair for the NAACP Board of Environmental and Climate Justice Committee. Apologies. And along with that, with these astonished speakers, I have Mr. Hilton Kelly, who is an activist, founder, Community in Power and Development Association. Within this session, we will focus on the United States and the Caribbean, two regions of the world where vulnerable populations experience differential impacts from environmental hazards and climate-related disasters. The Gulf Coast, known for its natural beauty, faces the dual challenge of hurricanes and escalating heat events. As we approach the 18th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, a devastating event that resulted in over 1,800 fatalities and approximately 125 billion in damages. The region is reminded of the enduring impacts of such catastrophic storms. Moreover, the region grapples with the intensifying frequency and severity of extreme heat waves with record highs in Houston and New Orleans. In the Caribbean, the impacts of Hurricane Maria and the islands of Dominica, Puerto Rico, and the US Virgin Islands are still felt today. Ranked as the third costliest tropical storm on record, Maria left Puerto Rico and the Caribbean reeling with widespread homelessness and tragic loss of life. Meanwhile, the second anniversary of Hurricane Fiona serves as a reminder of its impact, causing a complete power outage in Puerto Rico and resulting in over 2 billion US dollars in damages to the grid. These events underscored the urgent need for climate action plans that center equity, justice, and resilience. During this session, panelists will provide attendees with an overview of the short-term and long-term impacts of climate disasters like heat waves and hurricanes on vulnerable populations, including resulting public health issues, displacement, and climate gentrification. Panelists will also compare and contrast response and recovery efforts in the Gulf Coast and in the Caribbean to help attendees gain a deeper understanding of the interconnectedness between the struggles of those impacted by climate disasters in the Gulf Coast and the Caribbean, particularly in Puerto Rico. Panelists will share innovative policies, initiatives, and programs designed to bolster community resilience and strengthen infrastructure in both the Gulf Coast and Puerto Rico. Attendees will hear how these collective endeavors can play a crucial role in averting comparable devastating consequences of climate change faced by residents in both regions. Welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for being here. We are so happy to have this discussion, these important discussions. Please feel free to give us a little background about yourself and introduce yourself, your title, and the work you are doing right now. Ms. Adriana, would you like to go first?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Adriana Gonzalez. As Ariel mentioned, I am an environmental justice organizer with the Sierra Club here in Puerto Rico. I am born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico. And I have a few slides. And let me see. Yeah, this works. So as you all know, in 2017, Hurricane Maria struck Puerto Rico as a Category 5 hurricane with extreme winds and extreme weather. And it was one of the most catastrophic things that we've ever lived here on the island. And we still feel the aftermath today. And when we talk about the hurricanes, we always say that it unveiled a lot of the injustices that were already happening in Puerto Rico. So apart from the mass destruction, we had all the other issues that were a lot of the political sense plaguing our communities. Apart from the hurricane, we've been suffering since Hurricane Maria and before a myriad of many other climate crises. So we had a devastating earthquake after Maria. We've been experiencing extreme droughts. In my lifetime, I've already received water shortages and what we call rationing 3 times already. But we've also experienced a lot of flooding and extreme weather events. And that also echoes into our coastal habitats. So we've had, for example, a lot of dying corals in the past few years. And all of these, the word crisis sadly has become a normal term in our reality in Puerto Rico. But a lot of them, again, are not only effects of the climate crisis, but also effect of the bad governing strategies and the lack of commitment from government structures to mitigate, adapt, and confront the climate crisis in the extreme way that we need to do it. Like it was mentioned before, we've been experiencing power outages, the privatization of our electric system, and many other things. So, although we have been experiencing these climate events, it is crucial for us that the solutions need to come not only from mitigating and adapting to this changing climate, but also from the political sense. So I'm just going to mention 4 things that we've been doing and focus on one of the areas that we've been working. One and the final, like on the crisis spectrum, this year we've had an incredible heat wave events. Like those temperatures that you see there are the temperatures that we've been having daily since about June. Today, I'm right now at a nice, cool 92-degree weather. So yeah, extreme heat is something that we've also been experiencing. And although we're a tropical island and have the beaches, love the heat, but the extremities that we've been experiencing this year are something that we have never lived before. So we asked for climate justice, and the 4 areas that we've been developing with communities is long-term opportunities for economical and social development. A lot of the things that we've seen before and after Maria is a lack of opportunities for people to be in their communities, to live in their communities, to be able to have a house, to be able to have an economy, to be able to have a job. So one of the things that we've been doing is focusing on coastal communities and developing examples of how can we create jobs that are just and that let people live in their communities and thrive, while also protecting the coastal habitats that protect us from hurricanes and floods and many other things. The second thing that we've been doing is supporting and building strong community leadership. Something that we've experienced in all of these crisis events is that when the moment of emergency happens, the first people that can respond are your neighbors, are the people that live near you. So giving communities equipment, access, knowledge, and ideas, and just being able to talk to each other about how can we build stronger community leaders is something that's been crucial for us. The third thing is infrastructure. Here in Puerto Rico, we have a lot of infrastructure issues. Obviously, in our Sierra Club grassroots efforts, we've been focusing in giving people emergency infrastructure. So there you see some solar lamps distribution and also some recycling stations, which is very important in the times of climate crises, because in all those moments of hurricanes and earthquakes and flood, there's a lot of waste being developed. There's a lot of single plastic being used, and all of these things go to landfills that are polluting communities. So we need to create better infrastructure to confront that. And the last but not least area that we've been focusing is on energy justice. And here I'll stop a little bit and say that one of the things that we focus is that to reach energy justice in Puerto Rico, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. Right now, there is a big influx on bringing methane gas to Puerto Rico as a solution. And we say we cannot keep spending thousands and millions of dollars on importing things that then we burn here and pollute our community. We need advocating for clean distributed energy. And here is very important, the distributed part. One of the biggest issue in Hurricane Maria was that the power generators were, most of them, the ones that gave big, amounts of power, were far away from communities that needed it, or that used the most amount of electricity. Communities near also needed them, but those long transmission lines were very hard to restore. So we've been advocating for distributed solar panels, where we use everyone's rooftops as the resource to put solar panels and have a clean distributed energy. And those are two examples, the Queremos Sol and the Climate Action Now declaration of public policy that we're moving so that the policy reflects the crisis that we're facing with the climate. There's been a spread of political activism, of rallies and marches, asking the government to bring sun and to spend the millions of funds that they're spending in diesel fuel for emergency generators in installing solar panels. And last but not least is supporting community organizations. So all those big public policy things that we're talking about take time. And there's still hurricanes happening. There's still crises happening. People need electricity as a right, not as a commodity. They need it to live. So we've been working with different groups that are focusing on installing small-scale solar systems in rooftops of communities, so that people, it's not that they're going to charge all of their house, but they can put a fan, charge their phones, if they have medical devices. So small-scale solar systems that can provide the emergency solutions. So that's a bit of my info, and yeah, I'm up for questions. And that's a little bit of what we're doing to confront all these crises.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Adriana, for that wonderful introduction. I definitely have some questions to ask you myself, but I think first we can move on to our next speaker, Ms. Catherine Eaglen, and then we'll have some questions, open up the floor for some panel questions. So welcome, Ms. Catherine Eaglen, you have the floor.
Thank you so very much for this opportunity. I'm Catherine Eaglen, and I'm a survivor of Hurricane Katrina, and have experienced many hurricanes living on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. Because I live about 4 blocks from the Gulf of Mexico. And I lost 2 of my dearest family friends to Hurricane Katrina. And that's the moment a lot of people talk, you'll hear, don't make a Black woman take her earrings off. I always call Hurricane Katrina. That was the moment that I took my earrings off and refocused my lifetime civil rights activism to environmental and climate justice, because environmental and climate justice is a fundamental civil and human right. So first, let me start with a bit of historical perspective and a bit of truth here. We have not experienced this great transmigrification from slavery to Jim Crow, to the historical election of President Barack Obama, to the historical election of Vice President Kamala Harris. Environmental apartheid and climate colonialism continue to disproportionately impact Black and Brown communities. If we go back to Jim Crow segregation, and you had water fountains labeled white and colored, right now, you may not have those labels, but they may as well be invisible labels of under white for cleaner and under color for contaminated, because that's exactly where we are in the U.S. Unsafe water is more uncommon in communities of color. And the U.S. has 2 water crises, the failing infrastructure and the silent one of race. EPA data from 2016 to 2019 shows public water supply system that violate the Drinking Water Act are up to 40% more likely to provide services to people of color. And so, also, even if you look at where we are as it relates to air quality, and you go back to redlining, and especially even zoning, zoning and redlining were synonymous with placements of African American, Black, and Brown communities in low-lying areas and near heavy industries. Now, these low-lying areas also, all of this contributes to where we are as it relates to climate impacts, because these are also the areas that experience the most flooding. And the redlining, as we knew it, may be gone, but the problem still exists because African Americans more than likely set up homes in these areas. They are actually this is the heritage. These are there's a lot of people ask, well, why don't they just move? Which is a question that I just simply can never understand, how people feel like you can just take up roots and move. You cannot move your heritage, your home. That's where you reside, and that's the reality. We can also connect redlining and climate change to housing discrimination and health disparities, which is something very important. So when we look at Hurricane Katrina, in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, we had all of the developments that moved north of the Gulf. And this created a lot of impervious surfaces. And all of this development was created in historical Black neighborhoods, which will, with the sea level rise and the creation of all the impervious surfaces, will mean more flooding. And this is what we're looking at right now. ECHO, and this was basically when I said that my civil rights trajectory changed to have more of a focus on environmental and climate justice. That's when a former NAACP local president and I co-founded ECHO, which is an acronym for the Education, Economics, Environmental, Climate, and Health Organization, because we knew that this was a central focus. We are disproportionately impacted by hurricanes on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And we really need to be voices, and we need to amplify the voices of residents who are disproportionately impacted by climate change. And you cannot separate the environmental and the climate impacts as it relates to climate change. And one thing we have noticed is that anytime, especially in our state as it relates to policies, as long as your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed on any application that you submit for permitting, you will be permitted. I don't care how dangerous it is, how hazardous it may be. If you are zoned industrial, which, it really baffles me that every year we do a census, and based on that census, we do redistricting. However, for the past 50 plus years on the Mississippi Gulf Coast and other states in the Gulf region, rezoning has not been revised in over 50 years since Jim Crow was legal. And so that puts us in a position for even more harm as it relates to being able to adequately adapt, mitigate, and prepare and sustain climate disasters. And, the insurance rates are just absolutely astronomical. I don't even live in a flood prone area, and my insurance rates more than quadruple after Hurricane Katrina and after Hurricane Zeta. And that's the only thing we ever use our insurance for. We had not had a claim since Hurricane Katrina, and then we lost our fence during Hurricane Zeta. and file another claim. And now our insurance rate have more than tripled. So we're almost back to where we were post Katrina. So this actually puts us in situations to where we're simply not able to adequately prepare for climate disasters. And until we can address the environmental impacts that lead to these disproportionate impacts and how we're impacted as it relates to climate disasters. One other thing that ECHO did, we actually were interveners in the Mississippi State Public Service Commission's hearings on net metering, because we wanted a great net metering rule. First of all, let me say I am a proud solar owner. I am doing my part and tried my best to get other people to invest in solar. It's affordable. There's a plan where solar is just about in reach for everyone. We're retired, and I'm just so happy to see now, not only am I contributing to the greater good of our climate, but man, I am getting reduced bills. I am experiencing such a savings. But it would have been great if we had a true net metering rule. So we were interveners in that. We did not get the rule that we wanted. We didn't get the rule that we should have, because I feel like if I am generating electricity back to the grid, you should be paying me for my electricity, just like I have to pay the power company for giving me electricity. So we were not successful because the fossil fuel energy companies went crying to the Mississippi Public Service Commission saying that net metering was going to be a subsidy for the rich at the expense of the poor. And of course, they care so much about poor people, the people that they have been poisoning with their emissions and disproportionately impacting with the resulting impacts of climate. But all of a sudden, now they are afraid that investing in solar will impact poor people. And you could just hear the violins playing while all of a sudden now, and it infuriates me. It actually, I'm being sarcastic about it, but it really infuriates me that they want to use the very same people as pawns that they have hurt systemically and disproportionately for decades. One other thing that we have to look at, a just transition. We must transition from fossil fuels, but we must do so responsibly. And we must not just look at any transition. It has to be a just transition, because the Gulf Coast states are now the states who are facing transitioning, or it's really odd. And I always talk about this. People weren't talking about it a few years ago. I'm happy that people are finally talking about it. So if I mention it and some people aren't familiar with it, and that is wood pellets manufacturing, where our forests are being used as fuels, and our forests are being cleared and then used in the most toxic manufacturing process that I've ever encountered, to grind the forest into wood pellets. And then these wood pellets are being shipped over to countries in Europe, mostly the UK, to be burned for energy. And this is being deemed a just transition. This is supposedly to be getting us to the 1.5 C that's required under the Paris Climate Agreement. However, no one is looking at the impact that these industries are locating. They are deliberately being located in environmental justice communities. And they come in, lie on their permitting application, and say that they're going to be emitting just below the 250 tons per limit. And that would require them to have more controls. And then they immediately start exceeding their limits. And then until they're fined. And so we are being sacrificed again for a false climate solution. I don't even like to call it a solution, for a false climate scheme to benefit another country. And I did have the opportunity to go because this is an issue that ECHO has been working on, NAACP has been working on this side of the Atlantic, which we are the supply side, and on the demand side. And we spent 3 days in the British Parliament talking to them about the wood pellet manufacturing impacts in our communities. And we've also talked with our U.S. Congresspeople. And so we have to be at the front of the line. People who have contributed least but been impacted most must be at the front of the line when it comes to a new energy economy. We cannot, and these industries that come in to our communities with these false climate solutions, such as wood pellets, wood bioenergy, or carbon capture sequestration. These are false solutions that we must reject. I have had people to tell me we've got to do something. We have to transition from fossil fuel. And so someone is going to have to pay the price. I reject that. It should not be the people. No one has to pay the price, because we know that the solution lies with wind and solar. And so we don't have to accept these false solutions. This is just based on greed, and it's not going to help our climate. It is not going to help our environment. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for these introductions. Definitely extremely passionate, and we value everything that you are contributing in your spaces to environmental justice, climate justice, just energy transitions, all of the above. At this point, I think we can move into some questions. And the first one I have for you, Miss Adriana. So you did mention infrastructure and emergency response systems, and essentially some improvements that can be made, I should say, to enhance Puerto Rico's resiliency. So my question would be, what would you say would be some lessons that have been learned since then? And do you think there are more improvements from what you've already mentioned within your short presentation?
Yeah, thank you for that question. Well, I think one of the lessons that we've learned on infrastructure is, again, the need for people to have solar. So Catherine was talking about solar, and after Hurricane Maria, there's been this boom of private companies giving this finances, and people are literally giving up their mortgages to finance these systems. And that is something that we don't think is the solution, because then it's just the people that can afford it or that really can't afford it and are cutting down their livelihoods to afford this. So one of the things that we're talking is about solar infrastructure that's accessible to people, and that people are more, let's say, attuned with how they're spending their energy. We are an island. We can't, connect to a grid next door. So we have to be a little bit more resilient. So one thing that we've been focusing on the infrastructure side is for people to be a little bit more conscientious of how to use their energy. So we see the systems that these private companies are installing that have like 20 solar panels, so that people can run their houses with everything blasting how they're doing. And the conversations that we're having with communities is, we don't want to keep using energy like we've been using it. We want to use it smarter. We want to use it in a cleaner way. And that means maybe turning off some lights. Maybe that means eventually changing your refrigerator. So when we talk about solar infrastructure, we think that the first thing that everyone needs is small systems where they can power, like we were mentioning, a fan, maybe a radio, and something else. So with solar infrastructure, the thing that we think at the less amount of time, that's something that can be done. We are moving a proposal that's called We Want Sun, Queremos Sol, You can look it up online. I am not an engineer, but the engineers have done all the modeling and all the details, and it explains and it demonstrates that we can use the millions of dollars that FEMA and all these emergency funds are putting into investing in, again, diesel fuel generators for emergency, into solar. And then people can actually have access to solar without having to invest their livelihoods on it. So that's one point on the solar infrastructure. I think the second point that I'll make is on the waste. That's something that isn't maybe not the the hype conversation. So when Maria happened, we had an incredible amount of waste happening, not only because of all the debris, but because people were using packed foods, even the foods that in emergency systems were bringing. Oh, my cat came in. Um, yes. So we had a lot of waste and no way of managing it. We had, Catherine was mentioning about the wood pallets. We have so much wood in Puerto Rico that was on the ground, mahogany, trees that could have been used to maybe do economy, to maybe do, again, the just transition, that were wasted because we weren't able to have an infrastructure to deal with all the waste that was happening. So another of the proposals that we have, it's called Generación Circular, or circular generation. You can also look it up. It's a proposal where we want to make sure that in Puerto Rico, we have, first of all, accessible composting and accessible waste management. Because again, as an island, our waste systems are full. We can't keep just wasting everything. So those are the two big things.
Right. Thank you so much. Definitely. One thing I would say I like about the session is that although we're speaking more about Puerto Rico, but we're also speaking about the Gulf, there is an interconnectedness of challenges in certain spaces for both of the vulnerable and exposed communities. So, and I'm gonna kind of keep jumping back and forth. I did have a set of questions, but I feel like I'm trying to mold it based on what you've just already discussed. So back to you, Catherine. You spoke on climate gentrification and speaking about heat waves and that exacerbating energy poverty, and even also speaking about energy burden faced by vulnerable communities. So my question would be to what measures or even policies are you aware of that have been implemented to address this space, or address pollution even, or climate politics within the Gulf Coast, within Louisiana, and what reported outcomes and impacts as of 2023, or what do you hope to see, I should say?
So we continue to address policies at local, state, and federal levels. It takes all of it, all of the above. And that, unfortunately, that's the approach that you have to use. And I understand and I agree with what Adriana was talking about. I understand even with solar, we must make it affordable. It has to be accessible. And again, the people who've been most impacted, adversely impacted, must be at the front of the line in a new energy economy. This must be in any policy that we look at. This must be included. One of the things that we do in looking at this, from local, state, and federal level, is to, continue to be in those rooms, even on a global level. As a matter of fact, because we also attend the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change Conference of Parties every year. Last year in Sharm el-Sheikh, Sharm el-Sheikh, Egypt. This year will be in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, because we do have a local to global connection. We have a global stake in this. And so it's important to be at the tables. Sometimes you have to go the extra miles. You have to take other measures. Right now, we are engaged in 2 separate lawsuits to prevent toxic hazardous development that will exacerbate flooding, that will increase pollution. One is against a 24-hour military staging operation that will further contaminate the waters of Turkey Creek. It's in the heart of a historical Black community. When you're just the noise pollution alone, but it is also planned to be on the contaminated site of a former fertilizer plant. The other is a road, and that lawsuit is a federal lawsuit that's pending in the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals against the U.S. Department of Transportation, and that is to prevent a road project that will destroy hundreds of acres of wetlands and lead to further development that will destroy even more hundreds of acres of wetlands. And it threatens a historical neighborhood housing development area that was founded by Dr. Dorothy Height and the National Council of Negro Women in conjunction with the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And so we have to do whatever it takes to protect these communities, to protect ourselves. There are much better roads. We're not against progress. We're not against development, but we have to understand that we can have a thriving economy without compromising our environment.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And just to add on to that, and you touched on some of it already, but I guess for the audience, what role does community engagement essentially play within your committee's work, and how do you ensure that these communities have the voice within environmental and climate decisions?
Community engagement is essential. We don't do anything without our community. We don't speak for our community. We amplify the voices of our communities. We are here. We don't just pop in and pop out. They trust us. We have a proven record. We are here. I will say that persistence. You have to have persistence, patience, and determination. I do know that we had a campaign right after we learned of, just to give you a bit of background, after Hurricane Katrina, about 5 years after Hurricane Katrina, I could walk outside my front door and within 5 to 8 minutes walk from my home, I'm looking at sludge from the BP oil spill. And then not long after that, I'm reading the NAACP's cold-blooded report, and I find that out my back door, about 4 miles from my home, there's a failing coal plant. And so we went into action, and the first thing that we did was to educate the community. A lot of times, communities aren't aware of some issues, or may not be aware of a lot of detail, but culturally competent education is essential. And educating people on where they are and the level of understanding, because once they have that foundation, then you can't stop them. They're hungry for that knowledge. So education is key. And we were told repeatedly that we were going up against a powerful industry. We would never win. We would never stop the plant from burning coal. I am happy to say that of February 2015, the last barge of coal was delivered to that plant, and the coal function has been decommissioned. So we don't listen to people tell us what we can't do.
Thank you and congratulations. Definitely, I appreciated your comments and working within community engagement. And myself, just popping in communities isn't ever going to solve the problem. Building that trust, that relationship, and really letting them, as you said, understand the problem and what it's actually doing to these communities and helping them kind of advocate for themselves is key. providing them with the tools so they can see what's actually happening, and allowing resources to be flowed to them as well, access. So thank you for that. And with that, on that note, I'm going to switch gears to kind of maybe focusing on disaster preparedness, and focusing on extreme heat, hurricanes, and such on. So this question is for Adriana. With recent events such as the COVID-19 pandemic, and increasing occurrences of extreme heat and even hurricanes, how has Puerto Rico adapted its disaster preparedness plans to address the intersecting challenges of public health, extreme weather, and environmental justice? And how has Puerto Rico moved beyond resiliency as well?
Yeah, great question. We could spend an entire symposium on it, but I'll touch. We think that the word resiliency has been used a lot after these hurricanes, and when we talk to communities, a lot of them are tired of hearing the word, because they don't want to just hold on to the things that are going on. They want to thrive and they want to transform their realities. So a lot of the work that we've been doing here is around that. One of the things that I think has really changed is, first of all, the perception of people of solar power. Before the hurricanes in 2017, again, it was just the people that could afford it that would see solar infrastructures. After Maria, there were so many donations of solar panels. We participated in donating solar lanterns to communities. And one of my favorite stories was, so we started with the communities that we have already worked even before the hurricanes, distributing these lanterns to them. And when we went to one of the houses, there was this man. He was a bit older and he saw the lamp, and he was, he had never seen this contraption with like the panel and the lamp, and he looked at it and he was like, yeah, sure, this is gonna work. So we gave him the instructions on how to use it, and we went the next day to check how it was working, and he came out just like so happy, so excited, saying like, it actually worked. I really didn't think it worked, and it was one of the greatest examples of how just giving the people access to technologies, to ideas, is so powerful for them to see literally a brighter future. That community spent almost a year without power. So that lamp was his light every night. And, so first of all, that hope in solar, that access to solar has expanded, thanks to many foundations, donations, that there's community centers that have access to solar. So we see it a lot more, and people now actually believe it's something that we can have in Puerto Rico as a power source. I think the other big shift, and this again is to the community base. We know that in these crises, the response from the governmental fractions is very limited to go and fill out this form when you don't have power, when you don't have access, when you just want food and to be with your people. So I think, again, the building of the community infrastructures has been crucial. So like Catherine was saying, the people in the communities know what they need. So making sure that we are listening to them and we're giving them the power to do the solutions that they know will work on their community. And I think a big change after the hurricanes has been a lot of more communities being organized, knowing where the people that have maybe sensible medical needs live, and organizing themselves. And I think that has been crucial to making sure that in future events, which with Hurricane Fiona we saw last year when they happened, we have an emergency response that is not just, again, putting a Band-Aid on a bleeding wound. It's something that is going to be on the long term, because we're building the community, not just putting something and then leaving. I think the third thing that, for us has been really important after the hurricanes, and again, with all the crisis, and then the pandemic, is again organizing our communities around what we've been talking about, access. So one of our initiatives is with a group that's called Amanecer 2025. And what they've been doing is installing those emergency solar systems in people's houses by teaching the people how to do them. So, and even if you can't go into the roof, you can either learn about it, work with the cabling under it, or even make the coffee for people that are building it. So again, I think it's instructing the people, and part of those sessions also include going and seeing how you're using energy in your house. So again, thinking of how can we have a better relationship to our energy system, but also making sure that people have the access to it. And for, there is more community planning. I think people are more aware when a storm is coming. People also go, we are very close to the date of when Maria happened. And it is a, collective trauma that we experience. People lost their lives. They lost their family members. They lived in darkness for a year. So something that we've also learned, I think, in everything is the sensibility of just talking about these issues and making sure that we are very sensible and bring the human side to it, because it is a tragedy what happened. There was a lot of, again, solar panels and funding happening after that, but it cost the lives of thousands of people. So when we're talking about these issues, we always want to bring up that it was a tragedy, that it's not something that we want to happen again. So we can't just, again, do a plan and think that's not going to happen again. We need to be sensible and have real solutions.
Absolutely. And not to make jest, but your cat just agreed. But definitely, and I hear you on the trauma and the PTSD, and I did, and I apologize. I did not relay my sympathies, and I'm so sorry that you had to endure all the trauma, pain, anger, and death. And we are happy to have you here today. And I did want to. I loved that you used thrive and transform their realities. I loved that. It's very empowering, and I just got a little bit of goosebumps. I think that's really important. And just even hearing what you're saying, just hearing the word resiliency, crisis, it is very much jarring and oversaturated. I mean, of course, it's important, but it sometimes doesn't really give that glimmer of hope. Like, okay, we know there are problems, we know there are things to do, but how do we take that next step? Like, let's move, take that next step. So I love that, and I do agree. I think all of us are on the same page with giving the communities the tools, giving people the tools, because and Miss Eglin, you mentioned sometimes people don't even know what's happening. So it's our job, our responsibility as people in this space to help people understand and see what's actually happening. So thank you for your questions.
And I do want to say too that just listening to Adriana, I was having chills because flashbacks. And so that trauma, the PTSD, it just never leaves. I don't care where you are. I can remember attending my first UN conference in Warsaw, Poland. It was right after Typhoon Haiyan in the Philippines. And I, could partially identify with what was going on. And we met with the Philippine delegation. And, just in relating my experience with Hurricane Katrina, we had this connection. We had this bond. So there is, and I certainly, I just smiled when you said, because I always say that we want to take our communities beyond merely beyond merely surviving to thriving. So there's just, I think, so much similarities in these communities.
Absolutely. Thank you for that point. I was going to ask you a similar question to Ms. Adriana. With the 18th anniversary of Hurricane Katrina just passing, what lessons do you have been learned regarding, again, disaster preparedness within and response, I should say, in the Gulf? And do you think, or how has the region evolved in terms of um, the word again, sorry, resilience since that pivotal event?
Sure. And I I will say I add just transition to that list of words that people talk about, but we don't ever see real action about resilience. We will hear that there have been lessons learned from Katrina, but every time I am talking to people who have experienced recent storms, I don't see a lot of difference, to be perfectly honest. And as it relates to our relief agencies, I, you know, it's always the same stories that I'm hearing, and to hear that any community was without electricity for over a year is unacceptable. In 2023, we should not be having this, and the until our agencies, until our government really takes this seriously and really invest in the proper planning, invest in the proper infrastructure, we're going to continue to have these deficits when we're faced with these climate crises. Until we get serious about climate change and we stop the oil and gas leasing and drilling, until we get serious and stop investing in false climate schemes and start investing in what we know will work, and make and ensure the accessibility and affordability for everyone, then I honestly, people and communities have done a lot. We do a lot of disaster preparedness. I will say that when we first started doing our educational campaigns, I always say we have a lot of really smart, educated tables and chairs, because when we first started, there were a bunch of empty chairs and we didn't get a lot of people to attend. And so we just had to be creative, and we said, well, okay, if they're not going to come, then we'll start going to them. So we started going to the churches on Sundays. We started going where the people were, and where we already had an attentive audience. And that's how we started to build trust and interest. And so we would go on Sundays, and we'd go and make all the arrangements with the pastors ahead of time. And then we would have it arranged where the pastor would talk about it from the pulpit, and after service, they would come in the back. We would have lunch ready, and then we would have our classes to start. So we had an attentive audience all the time. And one of the things that we learned when we started doing this was that most of the churches had to be rebuilt after Hurricane Katrina. So almost every church is new, and they all had fire extinguishers installed. None of them had been serviced, you know, for years since they had been installed. So that was one thing that we were able to look at. So communities, I think we have to do just as we do in the aftermath, the immediate aftermath after a storm, because we didn't have any government assistance for the first couple of weeks after Hurricane Katrina, as in most areas. That you just don't have that government assistance. You're on your own, and we had each other to depend on.
Thank you so much. I think I'm gonna have maybe I'm just gonna ask a question and feel free to jump in. So this will be for the both of you, and then we can transition to taking some questions from the audience. I do see some have popped up in the chat. So um, apologies. I'm not sure how I lost my space. Oh, okay. Sorry about that. So this would kind of be more. I know we spoke on the just energy transitioning. We spoke about, the importance of even solar moving forward. But with the rising temperatures, and these temperatures having direct health impacts, including health-related illnesses. Can you maybe touch on or elaborate on the public health challenges posed by these extreme heat threats, and if any measures, if you know about, being taken to protect these vulnerable populations within the Gulf or Puerto Rico? And any of you can jump in whenever.
Adriana, you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. So, you know, one of the public health issues, obviously, with the rising temperatures is again on the energy sector. And here in Puerto Rico, so our energy transmission system did collapse during Maria, but it was rebuilt. And what we've seen in the past, well, it's been about 2 years since they privatized the electric company, is that there's been an intense amount of bad management. So there's not only been outages, but there's also been a lot of fluctuations. What does that mean? And again, I am not an engineer, but we've had to learn with all of these issues about engineering, because air conditioners are getting fried, and even smaller appliances are getting fried. So one of the crisis is that even people that have access to things that will be able to cool them in these extreme heats, they are, being destroyed because of the lack of a stable electric system. So we need a stable electric system to make sure that we have those systems such as fans and air conditioners, etc. One of the conversations that have been happening in the past few weeks here in Puerto Rico actually is about the schools. So the schools do not have air conditioner, the public schools, and the what do we do about that? Do we change the time? Do we change the schedule? And again, the government being very lax about it. They after this was, on the news about the children literally getting cooked in their schools. The government response was to buy a lot of fans and display this picture of so many fans that they were going to install. And we see, like Catherine was saying, that the government doesn't recognize this as a public health crisis. They take it light, especially here in Puerto Rico, because we are a warm island. But the warmth that we're feeling right now is not normal. So I think that hasn't reached to the government levels. And in Puerto Rico, we have a very interesting, and I think in many hot places, relation to air conditioners. You go to government buildings and they're blasting, like people are with their parkas because they blast these air conditioners. So we need to recognize that what's happening right now is not normal, and that we need action on that, especially on the heat side. I will also touch on the public health side. Um, Something that we've been working a lot on that I already mentioned is the waste management. Um, we in Puerto Rico have a little bit of over 20 landfills, and mostly none of them fill with EPA standards and are up to a point where they will not be able to receive more materials. So with all these things happening, with all these crises, we see that nothing is being done in the political side to address that. And we think it's crucial that we address the waste, because if not, we will literally be living around our waste here in Puerto Rico. Um, and I think the last point that I'll mention on public health is the water supplies. So we saw with Maria contamination of water supplies. We've seen with the droughts and the floods, contamination or lack of access to water supplies. We are not doing anything at the governmental side here in Puerto Rico to address the crisis, like the public health crisis of not having water. and it's a reality that's looming, and that we know with the extreme heats, it's a deadly combination of people not having access to clean water and living in extreme heat. And there is responses on the community side, obviously, because the community, their livelihoods is at stake, but we don't see a commitment from the government on doing anything to sustain that.
Right. No, thank you for those great points, honestly. And being from the Caribbean myself, I am from Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, the going to school, the teachers had the AC, and the students were kind of had to just be. And no, I could, but I agree. Even with the temperatures, I was struggling in this heat wave, and people are like, "Aren't you from the Caribbean?" And I don't want to complain because I know there are people who do not have access to AC, a cool home like myself, but I, Trinidad is generally 80s, and it's cooler air. But yeah, I can just imagine the heat. It's been extremely crazy globally, I should just say. So thank you for those points. And
So let me
Miss
say,
Eglin, yes,
yes,
please
yes.
jump in.
I want to say that the tremendous adverse health impacts, this is central. It's at the intersection of environmental and climate injustices. We have high rates of asthma and other respiratory and environmental related diseases. If you and We had our Mississippi State Department of Health and the CDC were able to connect the severity of the cases of COVID and COVID death and the contributing factors, the comorbidity factors, were almost all environmental health related that contributed to COVID case severity and death. And so this is something that we have to look at when we're talking about climate pollution, environmental pollution, pandemics, high, climate as far as the high heat waves. We had 17 days of high temperatures in the high 90s, but heat factors between 115 and 120 degrees, 17 straight days of that, leading up to the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina. So we have record heat, and then in the winter, we're having record cold. So, and you still have people who are denying climate change. And also, when we go back to things like oil and gas drilling, people have moved on from the BP oil spill, but those who were involved in the cleanup efforts, those who lived in what they call the red zone of the BP oil spill, are suffering tremendous health impacts as a result of that oil spill. And one thing that a lot of people don't talk about, and that's environmental health, or I'm sorry, and that is mental health, and how people suffer from mental health. And there are actually long term, and we did touch on that a little, but long term impacts of mental health after climate disasters, after environmental disasters. And there was a spike in domestic violence in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina and in the aftermath of the BP oil spill. And so those are things that a lot of people don't like to talk about, and things that we should talk about, especially also the disproportionate impact on women as it relates to environmental and climate health impacts.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Thank you so much for that. So we have about 10 more minutes. I will say we should take a question from the audience. Um, this one might be more directed to you, Miss Egland. Do you feel, and this is from Miss Shirley. Hi, Miss Shirley. Do you feel the EPA is enforcing environmental laws and regulations to ensure the chemical industries are not adding additional burden and damaging the Gulf communities? And I will add the question: onto the screen so you can have access to it as well.
Okay. My short answer would be no. um, I will say, though, that I'm hopeful. I am now with the new administration. I'm looking more at the glass being half full with an administration, even though I will say that I do have some concerns that I don't hesitate to express, even with this new administration being the Environmental and Climate Justice Administration. So we do have much more dialogue than what we've had previously with EPA. I do think that there are efforts made to improve, but we cannot forget that we had a lot of our environmental protections greatly diluted in the 4 years of the previous administration. And so this is how we got wood biomass categorized as a clean energy source along with wind and solar, and it is anything but. So I do think that the EPA is trying. I do think that we have an administrator and we do have a president that is more concerned, that is more open to listen. So I am very hopeful that we will be doing more. We are in talks now with the EPA. And like I said, it takes putting a lot of pressure and it takes not giving up until your voices are heard. And this is what we are doing. And so finally, they are looking into this. We did even have the EPA to come into the community where we're working who are suffering the health impacts from the manufacturing of the wood pellets.
Thank you for that. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Shirley. I have one more question, and this is going to be for you both. This is from Daija. I hope I said that correctly. Thank you both for your work as a former New Orleans resident and historian of the Caribbean and Gulf South. Your presentations hit close to home. I apologize, that wasn't actually a question, but it was a great comment regardless. Thank you, Daija. Daija has a question. Hi, Adriana. I work with Sierra Club here in Maryland. How closely do you work with your chapters towards your goals in Puerto Rico? Is there anything we can do to help?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So we here in Puerto Rico, we try to do things our way all the time. So we do work very together. I'm a national staff, but we work with the chapter. So our volunteers and our goals are the same. Something that we always tell people about when they ask us what they can do is, first of all, hearing these stories again and not listening to me in particular, but listening to the communities. Like Catherine was saying, always listen to the stories of the communities first. Apart from that, we need the federal government, like we were saying, that has good intentions to actually take those intentions into reality. Here in Puerto Rico, we can't vote for president or for Congress. So the people in Maryland that can vote and can go out and ask their Congress people that can vote in Congress to take action into reality. We need to make sure that the federal funds that are millions and millions of dollars don't go to the fossil fuel industries, which is what we're seeing is happening right now, because they say, let's buy, a diesel generator, let's put natural gas or methane gas because it's cheaper, when we know that's not the long-term solution. So let's push our federal agencies to make actually what they need to be doing.
Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions from our audience? We have about 5 more minutes. Okay. Do our speakers have any closing comments that they'd like to make before we close up this session? I should say, end the session.
I can. So I thank you again for listening to our stories. I think it's always hopeful to listen to other communities that are fighting. We see a lot of similarities, like we were saying when Catherine was talking about the issues in the Gulf with the issues that we see in Puerto Rico. But I think one of the biggest, similarities is the hope that we have for something better, the hope that we have for our communities. And I think that's what keeps us going. And we will continue to see all these crises happening, sadly, for some time. But organizing, learning about what the other communities are doing, not only in Puerto Rico, but in the Gulf and in other areas, is always inspiring and keeps us going. So thank you for the session and for joining.
Yes. Thank you so much, Adriana and Catherine, for joining us today. Just echoing your sentiments, extremely inspired. Even you just saying the word hope kind of give me a little chill again. I'm not sure what's happening, but I felt it. And I think you felt it as well, Catherine. I saw your smile. So I'm really happy to have been included in this session with you both. And thank you to our listeners and viewers. I hope you enjoy the rest of the other sessions for the symposium. And with that being said, I hope you have a lovely day.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all.